So, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday morning. I have no idea what the date is, but it's sometime in June. Anyway, so good morning. I think we are actually live. So before I begin this show, first of all, I'd like to say good morning to Gregor, who, as most of you will now know, is standing to my right side. And I would like to say good morning to Kris. Good morning, Kris.
Good morning, Rosemary. Good morning, everyone.
And you can see that we have Kris on with us today. Now, for those of you who are regulars on this show, you will know, boy, did I ever give Kris a hard time for actually leaving me all by myself for the weekend. Of course, we were only kidding around. And the truth of the matter is that we all need weekends off, don't we? We all need time with our families. We all need to do those things. And so, even though we were joking around, I did understand why Kris did need that weekend off. And normally, what we would begin with now is normally, as you know, Kris is not usually seen on this show. You hear this voice in the background there, and that's where Kris likes to be. And normally I would say to her, so Kris, what kind of a weekend did you have? So I know for many of you, you have seen things on Facebook. I know that there are many of you who are very aware that something tragic did happen this weekend. And I know that many of you are curious as to what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and so on and so forth. And I know that because we know that so many of you have reached out to Kris, so many of you have sent messages, so many of you who have emailed, so many of you have left messages on Facebook. So we know that many of you have been very concerned about Kris and how she's doing. So because we know that so many of you know something of what happened, I asked Kris if she would like to be a part of the show this morning, to come on the show and to tell us in her own words, because I feel that it is not for me to say what happened, it is for Kris to say what happened, if she would like to. You may also have known that we have been absent. We have not done any off-the-cuff stuff this week. And we will not be doing our story time on Saturday. But I think I'm going to hand it over to Kris for her to explain why that is, or just simply, I just wanted to say anything she wants to say, to talk about anything she wants to talk about. And as this show, we all know this show is always named The Spirit World Sees All. It's just that we wish sometimes they'd just give us a heads up. Now, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So I'm going to hand over to Kris. I'll be chipping in from time to time. Before you make any comments or have any questions of any kind, I'm going to ask you to please refrain from using the chat room this morning in any way, shape, or form until Kris has said what she has to say. I don't want anything interrupting it, and we will possibly, no guarantees, but we will possibly be then having an opportunity for all of you to join into the chat room, to make comments if you would like to make comments, and so on. But I'm going to ask you, while Kris is talking to us and telling us her story, I'm going to ask you, please refrain from going into the chat room or making any comments whatsoever. Thank you. So, Kris, so how are you doing?
I have my ups and downs, Rosemary. First of all, I want to say Rosemary didn't ask me to come on the show to do this. I called her up yesterday to say, listen, tomorrow's the day we do the show. I really want to do the show. This show is helpful and inspiring, and it gives me something to do. So, let's get the elephant out of the room, the tragedy. On Saturday night, my husband passed away very unexpectedly. And it was very traumatic for our youngest, Calvin, and his wife, Erin, because Mike suffered a heart attack in the car with them as they were on Interstate 95, just outside of Baltimore. Our weekend off, we did what we normally do. We have some absolutely precious relatives, elderly relatives that we like to pop in and on visit. And we had gone to see my Uncle Dan. And then so I live in Vermont and we were down to Maryland. So it's a good 10-hour drive, right? So we got in late Friday night, Saturday morning. Rosemary and I were doing our show, and then.
Well, didn't you have breakfast with Calvin and Erin? And
I had it with Calvin and Erin, but I didn't have it with Calvin, Erin, and Mike because I came down to do our show. So Mike had it with them, and then they were out on the porch chatting, and Mike had shared because we were cleaning house and he was sorting through paperwork and he found a bunch of Calvin's elementary school paperwork. So they were all out there reading, what Calvin was writing back then. So they were having a grand time in the morning. And then the kids had surprised my husband, who's an absolute huge baseball fanatic, Baltimore Orioles fanatic specifically, with tickets to a Baltimore Orioles game. And Mike is also an avid autograph collector. And Nick Wickgren from the Cleveland Indians, a pitcher, Mike was going to meet up with him and talk with him while he was in the bullpen. And that happened. So he got his baseball pretzel and he got to sit in the outfield right above the bullpen, and they got to be all decked out in their Baltimore Orioles gear. And game was over. Unfortunately, the Orioles didn't win. I don't know what their problem was. They should have, but that would have made it a perfect day. And then they got in the car and they were driving to meet me because the whole reason we were heading down there was to move our nephew into a new apartment. And I have a van, we have a van, and we had all the big stuff in the van. So when they were about 5 minutes out from meeting me, I had actually left the house early. I had this niggling, like, you got to get to the parking lot early. And obviously now I know why. I get a call from Erin. And Erin says, Kris, Mike just fell asleep. And I said, did he faint? And she said, yeah, I think so. I said, call 911. So meanwhile, so from Calvin's perspective, he and Erin and Mike are having a grand conversation. They're talking about the pictures they just took at the game. He's talking about posting them on his social media. They're talking about, family and what's going to happen next for the weekend. And mid-sentence, Mike stops talking. And Calvin's sort of waiting for the next line or the punchline, and it doesn't happen. So he turns to look at Mike, and he sees Mike's head slump forward. And so that's when Erin called, and they pulled over to the side of the road. Long story short, he tried to give him CPR. 911 came, fire department, police department, rescue. They all helped out, but Mike was gone. There was just nothing that could be done. So the kids are giving me the details and saying, this is the hospital they're bringing him to. So I immediately left our meeting space and went to the hospital. I saw the ambulance pull up. I went inside because of COVID protocols, you can't be inside. They said someone will come out to talk to you and do the registration, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm thinking something serious has happened, but never thinking death. The kids follow the ambulance, they park, we're all outside, we're waiting. Maybe a half an hour later, the doctor comes out, and then he's like, you know what, let's take you back into the family room. I had called Rosemary because, of course, you got to get the healing chain going immediately when these things happen. And you were in the room with me when I had the phone on, right, Rosemary? But then
yes.
I didn't know if because the internet was terrible. I don't know if the internet dropped you
We
off
lost
or
connection.
yeah.
We lost connection.
So I'm not sure that you actually heard the doctor telling us that he had passed. And it was weird because he was like asking us all these questions. So I'm thinking whatever information we provide to him is going to be helpful to Mike in his recovery. And at the end of this questions where he's trying to formulate what could have happened and saying to Calvin and Aaron, there was nothing you could have done, absolutely nothing, because we tried everything and it didn't work for us. Apologize, we got a lawnmower man outside. Then he said, I'm sorry to tell you that your husband passed. And my first response back to him was, you're kidding, right? Because it was so surreal. You knew something serious had happened. They're asking questions to, help. I'm thinking, do something to help him. And then the next thing is, I'm so sorry, he passed. So it was like walking in some kind of movie. It just wasn't real. And then, the other things about, going back and seeing him and taking his wedding ring, which I now have, where's the camera? I now have on my hand. And his brother showing up because we were supposed to pass off the van with all the things for my nephew. So the brother showing up thinking he's just going to take the van, and his brother's seriously in the hospital and having to tell his brother and wife and our nephew that Mike had passed. So it was all sudden. And then knowing our eldest son was back in Vermont taking care of our cat, Moonlight Graham, which some of you hear in the background sometimes. And he didn't have anybody with him because all the family was down there in Maryland with us. So finding one of Mike's best friends and having to tell him over the phone, which he's known since childhood, that your best buddy just died, and could you please go to Matthew's house and be with him and tell him to call us so we can let him know that his dad passed. So all those things happened really quickly, and still, feeling the loss of not having the whole family together and really worrying about our eldest being alone. All those things happened. So that's a good stopping point for now, Rosemary, right?
So take a breath. Okay, so we know that this happens to so many people. We know that we're vulnerable. We know that life can change in a blink of an eye. We know all of these things as human beings. We do know all of these things. However, even though we know them, we don't really live as if we know them. I think we can't possibly, as human beings, live thinking maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next 5 minutes. We can't live that way. So we try our best to live, well, I suppose normally on a regular basis, hoping in somewhere in our subconscious that our life is going to continue just as we want it to. And then for so many people, then it doesn't. And there are so many people who pass so unexpectedly. They pass without rhyme or reason, or it seems. They pass 1 minute you're living a normal life. 1 minute you're meeting your husband for lunch, and the next minute you're not. And so I think it takes a while. And I think, Kris, because you are an earth sign, I think for you it worked really, really well, because we earth signs, we are always planning. We are always moving forward. Okay, what do we do now? What do we do next? And so I think that you've talked about it being a dream. You're in a daze, you're in a dream. But in some ways, I do think you were still functioning, right? You were still trying to function, trying to think normally. But there's nothing normal about this at all. So let's move to then, if you're up to it, to the next stage. Or I think it's to be said that your son Calvin and Aaron have been an absolute godsend to you through all of this, and I don't want to skip, but I think it's and I've been talking to you all on a regular daily basis, but they have been helping you so much, right? Supporting you in having to deal with what is going on next. So you take it, if you're ready, you take it from there.
Right. So so that was Saturday night. This brings us to Sunday. And of course, you know, Rosemary's phenomenal in these situations. And what you might not realize is that Mike and Rosemary know each other. So
Very well.
Rosemary has
Very well.
also lost a friend. And during the weekend, Rosemary went shopping, and she would say, sort of out of the corner of her eye, all of a sudden Mike was there. Or Rosemary would be talking to Calvin and I, and Mike would pop in. And so Rosemary's going through her own grief for herself. She's going through her grief for me. She's going through her grief for my family. And she has been the best friend you could ever have in your entire life in helping us through this situation. I know you don't want me to say this is about you, but I need to say this.
Okay.
And so, you know, thank God for Rosemary's gift and her willingness to use it. And thank God for Gray Eagle. And Rosemary, would you tell what Mike told you, or Mike told us, what happened to him?
Give me a minute.
Yeah, we'll both be sharing the Kleenex today.
Hold on. I got to dodge out of the camera. Got to get a tissue. Hold on.
Yeah. So Rosemary, you know, had Mike pop in when we were in conversations, and Mike told us from his perspective what he saw happen with Calvin and Aaron, which I think is very powerful.
Well, I think you called me on Saturday night once you'd settled, you'd gone home to Calvin and Aaron's house, and you were talking to me, telling me a lot of the stuff you've actually been telling people today. And I'm sitting listening to Kris, and naturally, because it is natural. Well, actually, what had happened was I'd gone to look for some particular pieces of crystal that day, and so I just went to one store, and I was just sort of looking around, and out of the corner of my eye, I kept catching glimpses of someone. I suspected it might be Mike. Now, this is only, no, wait a minute, I'm getting the time wrong. No, sorry. When I was talking to you on Saturday night, I kept catching glimpses of Mike. And some people will tell you, oh, those who have died, they can't, it takes them months to be able to connect, or people don't connect. They've got to be gone for at least a year before they're able to communicate. I've never quite understood that, because I've never had that experience myself, and it's not unusual for me to see someone actually sometimes within minutes of them passing. So this was what was happening with Mike. I kept catching glimpses, but thinking I'm not going to push it, and I was very too emotional my own self anyway. So I just, wasn't that I was ignoring him, but then when I started talking to Kris and her son and his wife, at some point, those who know me really well know that I have this thing. I don't know it because I don't see it, But apparently I have this thing with my eyes, right, Kris?
Yes, I know when they're talking to you.
So Kris had actually texted me to say, you know, that he was gone, and if you see him, can you let me know? And then when we got talking on the phone, the first thing I think you asked was, have you seen him? And when she asked me, of course, I can see him now as I'm talking. So just don't know quite what to do about that. Don't get excited here. And the first thing Kris wanted to know, which most people in these circumstances want to know, is can you see him? Is he around? Well, because Mike knows me really well. He's seen me working many times over the years. How long have we known each other, Kris? Years and years and years. And
yeah, since 1990.
Yeah, we've
2000.
talked about so many personal issues and stuff. We know each other really well. So at some point, I see Mike out of the corner of my eye as I'm talking to Kris, and Kris, you spot, right? It's the eyes that give it to me. They kind of slide over to the corner there, you know, to sort of, or wherever it is that I'm looking. But anyway, my eyes apparently do something really weird, and I don't even know to tell you what that is. But anyway, and there he was. And so Kris immediately caught it and said, is he there? Is he there? Can you see him? What does he want to say? What does he have to say? And so we did have somewhat of a conversation, but Mike, how much do you want me to say?
Everything. Hold nothing back.
All right. So then Mike was very emotional, as all of you can imagine. He described that he was in the light, and he was not emotional for himself. He was emotional for Kris. He was emotional for his sons. He was emotional for his sons' spouses. Mostly he was emotional because they were so upset and traumatized. So as always with Mike, you had to know him to understand when I say to you, he only ever thought of other people. Kris could ask him to stand on his head and whistle Dixie, and he would have done it. He might have complained, but he would have done it. Right, Kris?
Yes.
So, but he was very emotional, and Grey Eagle then stepped in and told Kris, and Aaron and Calvin were there at the time, right? They were listening, and told them, he said to Kris, don't worry, I've got him. So Grey Eagle, who is right here, and Mike, who is right there, not making this easy for me in any way, shape, or form. So Grey Eagle told me, don't worry, this was for Kris. Don't worry. I'm holding him in my hands. We've got him, and he's safe. And that was as much as we could do that night. Well, you see, this is what happens when you let somebody in the door. They take advantage, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So anyway, it was the next day when I went looking for this little piece of crystal that I was trying to find, and I kept catching glimpses of someone. I thought it must be Mike. And then I'd obviously text Kris in the morning, I'm here if you need me. But it's very important, I think, for all of us to understand that, you know, when this is happening to someone, although they do want to know that everyone is supportive, they don't really want to be having to answer the phone every 5 minutes. And you might think that you're the only person calling, but in fact, and especially in this case, I mean, the phone didn't stop ringing. So people, you know, when people are in this stress and distress, as much as it is wonderful to hear from everybody, and as much as it is wonderful to know that people care, we do have to step back and let them go at their own pace. And that's what I was doing with Kris. So I would text and say, I'm here, let me know. If you need, just call if you need anything. And I had to trust that if she needed anything, then she would let me know. And so now it is Saturday in the evening, mid-evening or mid to late
Sunday.
evening or something. So on Sunday, sorry, did I say Saturday?
Yeah.
Now it's Sunday. You now go for it, Kris. Just saying, I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about you guys.
Well, you know, for everyone else who has suffered these losses, whether they were long-time illnesses or something totally unexpected like this, then you have to reach out and you're calling the family members and you're connected and you're making sure that the ones you know are vulnerable have somebody with them. You know, so I had to, you know, call Mike's dad, and I've heard Rosemary over the years, and I try to emulate as much as I can from what she's taught me. You know, don't forget you can delegate, because as an earth sign, I'm kind of like take charge, take control, feeling like I've got to have control over the whole situation. And so I started doing that and called one sister and said, listen, can you let the rest of the family know? And I called Mike's dad and said, can you let the rest of Mike's siblings know? And we started, Calvin, Aaron, and I, with Matthew on the phone in the background, started trying to work out the obituary and what was important, and then, you know, who else needed to be contacted. And of course, here we are out of town. I'm in a strange town, and, you know, and Mike also had been on a trial medication, and I didn't know if he had to be autopsied or not. So we're working back and forth through doctors in Vermont to figure that out. But it was a weekend and all the places are closed.
Say, this was nothing to do with his heart, though. This was an entirely
Correct.
different situation.
Correct. But it was more, you know, because people choose to be organ donors, right? And this would have been that sort of circumstance where, in order to make the trial be worthwhile, he might have had to be autopsied. And so we had to wait for that kind of stuff to happen. So all I wanted to do was get home and wrap my arms around Matthew. That's all three of us wanted to do. And we had to be delayed and wait. And, you know, and we chose cremation, number one, because that's what Mike wanted, but also because it would have been really stupid to be in Maryland and ship a body back to Vermont and have it done, you know, so all these stupid things that you have to do instantaneously.
Mike is interrupting here, and to have to lug his big body would not have been easy. He's laughing about that. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
Well, he is a big guy.
So. Yeah, so you're doing all these things that you have to do from afar. And Mike was also in the military, in the Air Force, and there's certain forms and things you have to get to in order for him to get his military benefits and, you know, all that other. So couldn't do that from afar. So Matthew was at our house tearing it apart, trying to find these forms.
So now here we are, Sunday night. You've all had.
Well, let's get to the good point, right?
Yeah. Since, you know, for two and some day, a day and something anyway, running around, dealing with the grief, dealing with all of this stuff that you have to deal with, dealing with the fact that you're not local, so you're having to rely on so many people. And then you call me. And as I just said, when you open the door, you know, those sneaky people think all I've got to do is just push a little bit and I can get right in there. And by this time, Mike was not so upset that he couldn't talk. And in fact, he talked and talked and talked and talked, right?
Yes.
He described for Calvin what he saw. He talked about the blanket that they'd used to put under his head. He was concerned and talked about the jacket that he'd left in the car. That apparently he said that he'd seen Calvin lift up the jacket and say to nobody in particular, what do I have to do with this? Being very emotional because it's his dad's jacket he's found on the back seat. All these little things that come back after the event that are like little darts going into you because they're reminders that, you know, he's gone. And there is Mike describing how Calvin held up the jacket and said, what do I do with this? And Mike said, it's yours. It's too big for you, but you can use it as a blanket or just put it around you. And every time you hold it or every time you put it on, he said, you'll smell me and it will be a reminder to you that I'm there and I'm with you. And what else did he talk about? Oh, yes, because Mike is a big baseball fan, and we all know that he's a baseball fan. Your whole family are baseball fans. It's very crazy, very nuts about baseball. Anyway, I mean, you would come down here and stay here and then go to 2 or 3 baseball games in a day. You'd travel miles and miles to go to your different baseball games and then come back late at night and crash, and the next morning wake up and off you go again. Because in Florida, for those of you who don't know, well, why is she coming to Florida? In Florida, baseball teams often come down here. A lot of baseball teams come to Florida because the weather's good, and so they come and they can continue to practice throughout the winter months. So I couldn't figure out why Mike was talking to me now about football. Now, it occurred to me as Mike's talking to me about football, I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, does he mean soccer? Because in England, it's football. We know the right way to describe it. You might say it's soccer, but forget that. If it's got a round ball and you kick it, it's football. And in England, of course, we're all, in Britain, I should say, not just England, we're all big football fans. And so Mike is talking to me about football, which, as far as I'm aware, is not his game at all. And he's talking about Calvin, and he's saying to Calvin, you know, I was with you whenever it was the other night was it the night before, or whenever it was?
Yeah, the night before this conversation.
Watching the football game. You were watching football, you got football on TV. And I'm saying to Calvin, I don't think I've got that right. Were you watching soccer? And Calvin said, no, actually, we were watching football. We were watching English football. And then, so I really, you're into football? And I said, I support Leicester City. And he said, and so do I. So we have this fabulous conversation that's going on between Kris, Calvin, Erin, myself, and Mike, who just died the night before, right?
Yes.
How is that possible, Kris? Wasn't that great?
Oh, it was fabulous. It really helped the kids too.
He said a lot of other stuff, important stuff that you guys needed to hear, but that's for you to tell or not. It's up to you. But every day since he's supposedly been gone, and even today, every single day I've seen Mike, and every single day he's given Kris and her family messages, and every single day he's been helpful. I do want to just mention that at one point, I'm not sure if it was on Sunday or Monday, you were trying to decide, you all were trying to decide, because there's a memorial service on Saturday. You were trying to decide what you should give people for food. Should you give them pizza? Should you give them this? I don't know what your choices were. Then Kris said to me, can you ask Mike what we should feed them? And right out of his mouth, sandwiches. Right, Kris?
And that's what we're going to have on Saturday.
So you carry on now. It's your story now.
Well, there's just so much evidence that Rosemary gave to each of the kids, you know, even to Aaron. And for them, like Calvin put the front seat down to start giving Mike CPR. Erin had gotten out of the car since she was in the back and the seat had to go back, and she was on the phone with 911 helping them find them. At some point, Calvin moved from the driver's seat into the back seat because it was easier to give the CPR, and Erin didn't know this. And when Mike started talking to Rosemary, said, what did he say? Something like, I saw you thumping and bumping
Action man. He
from
called
the
his
back
son
seat.
Action Man. And he leapt into the back seat and started, I can't remember, thumping or pounding, I can't remember. But he talked about his son as being Action Man, leaping into the back seat so he could get to him better.
And so for Calvin, who knew he hopped in the back seat, but Erin never seen Calvin in the back seat, for Mike to come out and say, I saw you hop in the back seat, and for those two to realize, oh my God, he must have really seen us. I mean, because there's something about intellectually believing this and then getting actual evidence and aha moments. You know, so that was a piece of evidence. Or the blanket that you described, neither of them, you know, because you could just see them sort of go, ah, he knew about me putting the blanket under his head. Or Mike saying, like, hey, I'm so sorry. I was such a big guy that you and the police officer had to take me out of the car, you know, which he's gone, but they don't know he's gone. So he's, you know, a flopping noodle. And just so many other things that you absolutely know are true and ring a bell. And so, yes, we say they're dead here. They're gone. My husband died on Saturday, but he kept reminding us, Rosemary, right? I'm here. I'm not dead. I see what's happening. I'm going to be riding with you in the car on the way home. He made you tell us the Jack in the Box story.
We'll tell that another time, I think.
Yeah.
That's a funny story, though. Yes. But he was Jack in the Box because his ashes were in the box. There's more to that story. We'll tell that another time, I think. Kris, you know, we know that this is such a difficult time for you, such a traumatic time for you. And we know, I mean, you're being so amazing and so strong. And I want everybody who's listening to this story to understand that even though Kris is strong in this moment, there are other moments, probably more moments, many moments, that you're not strong at all, that you don't feel strong at all, and you just want to collapse and hide and pretend that the world is somewhere else. You don't want to recognize what's going on. I think it's important for people to understand, if you know of someone, but if you're listening to this, you know of someone who's experienced something like this, whether it's sudden or whether, as Kris said, it's someone who's had a long illness. Okay, what happens is this, and this is what I teach my students and all of you out there who say, what can I do to help? I want to learn to be more spiritual. I want to do more of this or this. Here is one way that you can help, because, okay, when this happens to you, everybody comes around you, your neighbors, your friends, people come out of the woodwork, people you don't expect come out and see, what can I do and how can I help? And it's amazing. And you're sort of carried along in a way by other people's love for the person. I know you are, Kris, carried away for people's love of Mike and people's amazing stories that they have to tell about Mike. And it's wonderful to not only to hear what they have to say about him, but also to see what people do for him and for the family. And then the funeral, and then the memorial, and then people start drifting away, because then everybody's got their own life. Everybody has their own life. They have their own, way of getting on with their life. and all of a sudden the person who has had this loss finds themselves alone. This is the moment when we can all help. And what we're doing for Kris, and I've done it for many patients over the years, and if you know of someone who's going through this, or if you yourself are going through this and people say to you, what can I do to help? One of the things I think it's really important to understand is what I do is I reach those certain people who I know I can rely on, and I ask them, can you be on a rota or a roster? Can you make sure you call on Wednesday? Can you make sure you call on Thursday? Or can you make sure you just call and check in, or you text and say, I'm here if you need me. And you put people on a list so that everybody takes turns to connect with that person who is now on their own and trying to deal with this. We're not inundating them. We're not having people call every 5 minutes, but those few certain friends, and you say, okay, you've got Tuesdays, you've got Wednesdays, you've got Saturdays, etc. And to make sure that there's always someone taking care of that person that you love. You can't be there for them necessarily, but you can make sure that you're on the phone, or you're on FaceTime, or you text them and just check in. And you do that until such time as this person can get back onto their feet. It's not something that you do for a week, and it's not something you do for 2 weeks. It's something that you need to do over several months until you feel that this person is getting back on their feet. And you just make sure you either go visit, you take a meal, you pick up the phone, make a roster of people who you can rely on, so that you know in your mind, okay, she's got someone there. In Kris's case, she's got someone there in the background. She knows if she's feeling down, if she's having one of those low moments, she can just pick up the phone and call that person. And that's what you need to do. Coming back to you, Kris, I know because we've talked about this, I know that hearing from Mike, I mean, you are obviously, I am too, one of the fortunate ones. Imagine that you've lost someone, and then within less than hours, there he is talking to you, letting you know he's okay, letting sort of showing in his way, hey, it was really me, and saying to his son Calvin, it was the best day if he could choose, and this was significant for me, if I could choose how to spend my last day, it would have been with you. And for Calvin to hear that, and for Mike to be able to say that, and for them to know, that they had that fantastic connection. But now, moving forward, you have the service in the memorial party. I'm going to call it a party on Saturday, which is why we are absolutely not having a story time. But Kris, I'm sure we'll have stories to tell the following Saturday, won't we? Maybe even about some of the things that happen and some of the things that happen on Saturday for you. Now, we all love you. We all are supportive of you. We are all there for you. And I know you're going to get lots of comments from people. Before that happens, can you give us something? Help us to understand what has inspired you to be so strong, or I want you to tell us, because I've made this point to you, it's okay to cry, but you need to share those tears. What is it that you would like to say to us to round this up, to finish this off for today at least, before we, if you feel like looking at the comments or the questions, and you really don't have to, but what would you have to say to people?
Well, there's a couple of things, because we all feel for people who have lost someone at those times, right? And the first comment you always get is, if you need anything, just let me know. What we have found are the people who go beyond that to say, I noticed a need. I'm not waiting for you to tell me what the need is.
Right.
And can I take this on? These people have blown me away and they're phenomenal. So if you're faced with a situation like this, don't do the typical, thinking about you and.
Well, I have to say, and this might sound very harsh, but I'm going to say it for a lot of people who say, oh, if you need anything, let me know. They know perfectly well it's a cop out, because they know perfectly well that you're not going to call them because you're too much in grief. And as Kris said, you want to be that person who says, oh, if you need something, let me know. You be that person. Or be the proactive person who connects with someone. In your case, Kris, they might not be able to connect with you, or perhaps they shouldn't even connect with you, because they can connect with your family or friends or people who know you. Okay, I really want to help. So can I bring food? Can I, whatever it is, be proactive. And this is what you're saying, Kris, right?
Exactly. And then, obviously I'm the wife and my children are the children and their spouses and significant partners. They're grieving. But my father-in-law is grieving. His siblings are grieving. His close friends, because we all know sometimes friends are even closer than families, they're grieving. And I want to also help them. And that's healing for me if I can do something for somebody else. So it's also not asking, allowing me to still give back, because that fills me too. So that would be sort of a lesson learned. But the most important lesson is, I think we walk through life. I don't want to say the word is fear, but we ignore our mortality, which means we ignore the mortality of the people we're with. And all those times we could have said, I love you, or all those times we could have said, listen, I'm not feeling great about this situation. Can we talk about it? As opposed to ignoring it or ranting and raving. Like in our instance, I was telling Rosemary this, I busted out crying before we even started today. On our drive down to Maryland, I passed by a big building and it had the name of the building in huge letters to it. And because it was so huge, I live in Vermont. We don't have those kinds of things. It caught my eye. And as we were driving home yesterday with my husband's ashes in the seat next to me, I saw this same building and I busted out crying, because little did I know when I drove down Friday passing this building that I would be driving back, because we got in at 2:45 this morning. And I think today's Thursday. Yeah. Little would I know that Wednesday, when I'm driving home, I would be driving home without my husband by my side. And so I would say to you, look at your friends, look at your family, look at your coworkers, and walk through life thinking they might not be here tomorrow, and treat them in the way that you'll have no regrets and they'll know how much you love and care for them. And the other thing I said to you, Rosemary, early on was, I have found, so my husband's friends, let's say some of them were my acquaintances. We would interact in friendly ways, but they were my husband's friends. That's where he spent his time. And I have noticed in myself since this instance and them reaching out to me, I'm saying to them on the phone as I'm ending, I love you. I'm typing back an instant messenger. Do you know how much you meant to him? I love you. And why was I afraid to say I love you before? Like, what are people going to think by saying I love you? Because we're all human beings and we should care for each other. We really should love each other. So that's the last thing I've already learned in this circumstance, to just really be authentic and vulnerable and truthful and just love people.
Well, I know how brave you are to do this. I know that once we're done, you'll probably be blubbering again. And so you should. It's because crying is very healing. Crying is very, very important way of us grieving and letting out our feelings and not holding stuff in. But I think it's also important for people to understand that not only should you cry, don't go away into a room and cry and hide. Do not do that. Because if you're hiding your grief, you're not allowing other people to share their grief with you. When you cry, when you share, you give them permission to cry with you too. And that's very important. Kris.
Yes.
Do you want to read any comments? If you have comments, if you have anything to say to Kris, you can either comment here or you can go to our Facebook page and comment, or Twitter, or wherever it is you want to go and give your comments to Kris. And we will read them all. Kris will avidly read them all. You always read them all anyway. So do you want to do that, or would you rather just say, and that's it, folks?
Well, I've been glancing at them as they're coming in, Rosemary. So everybody's so kind and they're offering condolences. I'm just wondering if, you know, Mike told you exactly what happened in the moment that he was talking to Calvin and then he passed. Is that something that you could share, or does he have anything else that he thinks important that we should know that everybody else would benefit from? Or anything at all?
Well, Mike was explaining what happened from his point of view. So 1 minute, Aaron was sharing photos with him. They were talking about things. They were having a conversation. And from Calvin's point of view, all of a sudden his father stopped talking. From Mike's point of view, I think he said something on the lines of, 1 minute he was listening, the next minute, in a blink, in one blink, he was gone. And he described being able to see everything that was going on. It's almost as if standing outside of his body, let's say, watching all of the stuff going on. But if I recall, and you'll probably recall it better than I, Kris, so correct me if I'm not saying this properly, or in fact, you know, you can tell what you remember that I said, because you know what I'm like, I forget everything. But he's laughing at me as I'm saying this to you, so he's reminding me now. Thank goodness he's here to talk to us. He does love you, by the way. I've got to tell you, I love you. So he's saying in a blink, he felt the warmth and was surrounded by light. The most amazing light. So he was already God, and it I don't even think you could say that it was a heart attack. I think he was just taken before anything happened, really. In that one quick moment, in a blink, less than a blink, 1 minute he was sitting in the car, and within a blink sitting, standing in the light, and how beautiful it was and how incredible it felt. And at the same time being able to watch what was going on, watching it as if he was there. Well, he was there, but watching everything going on, but not being able to do anything or to help in any way, but not traumatized by any of it, just as watching as an observer and knowing that he was in the right place. That's where he was supposed to be. Would you say that that's a
fairly
accurate?
And about his mom?
Pardon?
And about his
And
mom?
well, then, yeah, okay. So then, as I was listening to Mike, and as he was talking about this stuff, Kris, you asked, who has he met there? I'm listening to Mike because he's reminding me. And oh, there, nice. So who has he met there? And a lady came forward to stand at his side, and he held her hand and introduced me to his mum, which I do believe I've met his mum before. But he said only her. This was, remember, it's only an hour or so after he passed. So only her. And he described how he knew that there were so many people there, but he wasn't ready yet to go to that place because he was busy being with you guys. But he was with his mother. And I'm asking him now as we're talking, has that changed? And he's laughing and saying, big time.
Oh, good.
And what I'm looking at when I'm talking to Mike, it's like my whole room has become so bright. You have no idea of the amount of people that are surrounding him. Family, friends, you name it, Kris.
Excellent.
They're all here. They'll be at the party.
Okay.
Mike says something about the music, and he likes the guitar. I don't know. So
Oh, we had a choice of a piano player or a guitar player, and the piano guy couldn't make it, so we have the guitar player. So he knows who's coming. Excellent.
oh, really? Well, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Well, that's super.
You didn't tell me that.
No, we haven't said anything.
So he likes the guitar. So there you are. So that's confirmed that you've got, even though you didn't choose it, you got the right person coming along.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm leaving. Do you want to say any more?
Well, I love you all for your comments now, and I know people will hop on later. I really appreciate, the love you're sending my way. Keep Matthew and Calvin, especially, in your prayers, because that's who I care about, my kids and Mike's family. But also keep Rosemary in your prayers because this is her friend too.
Well, yeah. Well, you keep sneaking it in, don't you?
I love you, Rosemary. I couldn't do any of this without you. You are a godsend to all of us. So yes.
Okay. All right. Enough of the wonderful Rosemary stuff. All right. So Kris, again, I'd like to say thank you to you. I'd like to, because it was very brave of you, and I know how difficult it is, and you look perfectly fine. You should see her, everybody, when she's blubbering. Let me tell you, really, yeah, really, right? Which she'll be doing, I know. So if you could all please keep Kris and her family in your prayers, that would be great. So thank you, Kris. I think what you've done is going to be so inspirational to so many people. We are not going to, I did say maybe we'd have time for questions. We are not going to take questions this morning. We will not be doing the Saturday
Story
stuff.
time. Yeah.
We will maybe do some off the cuff stuff. Maybe I'll do off the cuff stuff with my daughter. Maybe Kris will be able to do off the cuff stuff. Maybe we'll do off the cuff stuff with your family present, with Calvin and Erin present. Maybe they'll do some off the cuff stuff with us. So thank you all for being so patient. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining us. And we will we'll be around. We'll be popping in. We know that, right, Kris? We'll be popping
Absolutely.
in. And just sort of go to our website, rosemaryaltea.com, if you want to know more about us, what we're doing. Don't forget, we do have our webinar on the 26th, where we'll be talking to the spirit world. I wonder if Mike is going to be interfering in that, Kris.
Helping, because you know he's been helping you all these years, so he'll stay helping.
All these years. So, yeah. So I don't for 1 minute doubt that he'll be right there with us on Saturday, along with so many other people in the spirit world wanting to connect with the people who join in the webinar. So, okay, so that's it for now, everybody. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. It's been an unusual, but I think very inspiring show. And once again, Kris, thank you so much for joining us. Please, everybody out there, have a very, very blessed rest of the day, and have a very blessed rest of the week. And we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye, everybody.